What's up, everybody? Trey Biddy with HawgSports.com, HAWGsports.com. The red-white game was rained out. Arkansas went 4 for 4 on transfer portal visitors over the weekend. Baseball lost 2 out of 3 to Texas A&M, their second straight series that they've dropped so far. We're going to discuss all that and more on today's episode of Hog Sports Live. Real quick, if you haven't done so already, give us a thumbs up or a like, whatever platform you're on Facebook, YouTube, we're on X, wherever else. Follow us. You know all the things. So I don't have to go over like every little thing. Like, comment, share, all that kind of stuff. Please do it. If you haven't given us a 5-star review, take a moment and do that on our Apple Podcast platform or wherever you get your podcast. If you haven't signed up at Hog Sports, you still got some time to do so for the 50% off deal or $1 for your first month. Again, this runs for, I guess, about another week before this is done throughout the transfer portal. So as long as the transfer portal is open, we'll be doing the 50% off or $1 deal. The 50% off deal breaks down to $103 a week, $448 a month, billed at just $59.70 for the entire year. Come check us out or try us out for $1. And if you like us for $1 after a month, go on the regular plan and you get Paramount Plus for absolutely free, which is a $100 annual value. So 2 great ways to sign up at Hog Sports, HAWGsports.com. No promo code or anything else. All right, we're going to be joined by Danny West here in about 15 minutes and Kevin Bohannan after that to talk baseball. You guys know Danny will be wanting to talk recruiting with us. Arkansas baseball lost 7-4 on Thursday, and then the doubleheader, they lost 11-5 on Friday and 9-2 later that day to Texas A&M. Up next is Little Rock, UALR, some people know it, on Tuesday and Wednesday, 6:30 and 5 o'clock respectively, and then they're at Florida in Gainesville for a 3-game series. First pitch there Friday, 5:30, 2 o'clock Saturday, noon on Sunday. So a big series coming up at Florida. Arkansas obviously losing the last 2 series, lost the last one to Georgia before that. All right. I was thinking about this a little bit. Like I wanted to do like a top 10 after the red-white game, transfer portal edition. But obviously we didn't have that. The weather up here was terrible all weekend. They did have 4 recruits on hand. Again, we'll talk about that in just a little bit with Danny West, but 4 needed recruits. I mean, it became obvious throughout the portal cycle that they needed these guys. But the guys, and I included a couple of the guys on the list, and we'll talk about them. But my top transfer portal addition so far, I think, is Corey Robinson, the left tackle. And the reason that allows Fernando Carmona to move inside, what I think will end up being his more natural position at guard. He hasn't ever played guard before, but I think it'll be a more natural fit for him. Corey Robinson, he was 91.2 pass blocking grade at Georgia Tech, which is number 1 among all Power 4 conferences. I think he's an athlete over there. He's not massive, 6'5", 307, especially when you look at the other side where Shaq McCroy is. But he is an athlete and got a lot of football under his belt so far. I think he has 24 career starts. So that's notable. To me, offensive line is the area they've upgraded the most out of anything, from going from a really bad offensive line in 2023 to a subpar offensive line in 2024 to what I think will be above average by SEC standards this year. Maybe it'll be better than that, but it's going to at least be above average, and that should impact everything, should impact Taylor and Green also. I've got Mike Washington, number 2. Washington, I've said before, I did not expect a lot from this guy. I thought he was going to be okay. I didn't think he was going to be as good as he is. 6'2", 223. Looks like he's all of that. He's faster than I thought. He's stronger than I thought, more powerful. I think he'll make for a good 1-2 punch with Braylon Russell when he comes back from his MCL sprain, which should just be a few more weeks, but shouldn't impact him, going into July or anything. So I think that's a nice addition because I'd gone into spring expecting them to need Braylon Russell to be a bell cow type of back. I don't ever think that's a good way to go into the season because, backs get dinged up as we saw with Braylon in the spring. Raylan Sharp, number 2. The reason I have Raylan Sharp, number 2, is I felt like wire to wire, he was the most consistent wide receiver. They're going to line him up in the backfield. They'll line him out wide. He's not a guy that's going to be like a game breaker for him, but can do a lot of good things. And I actually did see him make some plays that were like pretty impressive. Only 5'9", 165. They'll line him up in the slot. 124 catches for 1,514 yards and 10 touchdowns the last 2 years. Was an FCS All-American before transferring to Fresno State last year. They'll line him up in the backfield a lot. I've seen him, like go out in a wheel route, as we know Bobby Petrino likes to do from that spot. But he consistently caught the ball. The next guy I have is Shaq McCroy for a couple of reasons. Shaq wasn't necessarily the number one transfer portal offensive lineman in terms of, making an impact, but it's like he's got 4 more years of eligibility left. And I think he's a guy that might not be here that long because he's 6'8", 362. When you combine his weight and his height, just his overall size, he's the biggest Razorback that I've ever covered. I mentioned I talked to Clay Henry the other day about McCroy, and because he's got, probably 15 more years than I do, having covered the Razorbacks, and asked him if he'd ever covered anybody that big, and he said no. So I like what I've seen out of him. As he gets more and more polished, he's going to be a real asset to them at right tackle. 6'8", 362. I think it's interesting. Like there's, and Marion Harris is listed at 6'7". Shaq's shoulder pads are completely above Amarion's. Like he's got to be 3 inches taller. I mean, he's a big dude. Omega Blake, I don't know what order I'm in, but he's next on my list. Omega Blake, after the first 5 practices or so, we're wondering, like, who's going to be the go-to wide receiver on the outside? We know that they're going to be okay in the slot, but who's going to make plays for him? Omega Blake's the guy you look to because he averaged 24.8 yards per catch last year, which was second in the nation. He was the only wide receiver in the country to average at least 20 yards per catch and have at least 8 touchdowns, at least 7 touchdowns. He had 9 touchdowns last year. So pretty impressive numbers for him at Charlotte last year, and was at South Carolina where he put up some decent numbers as a sophomore there. But he really started to come along. I felt like that last practice before spring break, and then just seemed to get better. And then like the last couple of weeks, he's consistently running with the first group. I thought he really started to come on, probably processing a lot of things early, but they need him to be a guy for them. So he's next for me. Rohan Jones, probably with Mike Washington, a guy that I didn't expect a whole lot out of. He's been good. I mean, like from day one, like I'm like, oh, well, they got a bargain with this guy. I'm not saying this guy is Luke Has. I think he's probably more physical. You can look at him. It takes 2 seconds to look at the guy and tell that he's been in a weight room. I don't know if he's the pass-catching threat that Luke Has is. He had 30 catches for 470 yards last year and 9 touchdowns on a team that went to the FCS National Championship game. I feel like for probably a few $100,000 less than they would have had to pay Luke Has, they got a guy that's almost as good, if you want to look at it like that. And you got to kind of budget your money. Where are you going to put your money, So did they get better somewhere else with that trade-off? Caden Kittler's next. Caden Kittler's the first guy since Ricky Stromberg in 2022 who will start at center for Arkansas, who also started at center for them last year. Not them, but started at center last year. So every other guy they've had since Stromberg started at guard or some other position before moving to center. You can go back to Bo Limmer, Addison Nichols last year. So this year they'll have Caden Kittler. Center was not a great position for them. Addison Nichols was, just okay. Didn't really have anybody behind them. Amari Wiggins really wasn't, and I mean, he was much smaller than his listed size, in my opinion. So Kittler's a nice addition for him, guy that's played a lot of football. UCF last year in the Big 12 averaged 248.1 yards per game on the ground and had over 500 total offensive yards 5 times. Ismail Cece was very consistent. Is he a difference maker? Not in terms of stretching the field. Is he a difference maker in terms of catching everything that was thrown at him? Yes. Now, I don't think out of any of these wide receivers that I've mentioned, maybe Omega Blake has that potential, but I don't know that I'm looking at these guys and saying NFL guy, future NFL guy, future NFL guy. Andrew Armstrong, for as good as we think Andrew Armstrong is, he may not get drafted. He may not be an NFL draft pick, if you consider it like that. I'm not saying any of these guys are Andrew Armstrong either. But Taylon Green, if he can get to a point, which I think with better protection, if he can get to a point where he can go through his progressions, which better protection should allow him to do, then he's going to find open receivers, I think, with this group. I don't know that there's a guy that's going to be all SEC with this receiving core. I think Arkansas is probably going to be pretty decent on the ground. But I think that they've got, 6, 7 pretty good options at wide receiver. Do they have one great option at wide receiver? I don't know that yet. I don't think so. I kind of made a leap here with my next guy, Julian Neal. Julian Neal transferred from Stanford. He was at Fresno State before that, transferred to Stanford. They had a change, obviously, and he re-entered the transfer portal. He is Arkansas's highest-ranked transfer portal addition at a 92 4-star. So what I think is interesting about his addition, not only are they getting, the highest-ranked transfer portal guy that they've got, which I don't put a ton of stock in our transfer portal rankings, but I think it's important that for a unit that played a big role in Arkansas allowing an SEC worst 246 yards per game through the air, that they not only add pieces, like they needed to do more than just say, okay, we're going to add a transfer because we need a corner. We need a transfer safety. We need a transfer nickel. We're going to add one. But to go out and get like a lot of guys. And at cornerback, they added Keyshawn Davila, a guy I really liked in the spring. He was the number 1 ranked junior college defensive back in the country. They got Julian Neal, who I just mentioned, Jordan Young, who did not go through the spring at all, but was a starter at Cincinnati, and Kenai Walker, who was banged up, went through the spring, but was banged up through the whole time, who was a starter at Oklahoma last year. So they brought in all of those guys, those 4 players, in addition to high school recruits, but those 4 players to compete with, Selman Bridges, Jaheim Singletary, Jaden Allen, some of those guys. So I think that was real important to not just like bring in a guy here and there, but bring in a good bit of competition, invest in your secondary. And we'll see how safety works out. They did bring in Shakir Smalls from Maine. I know that doesn't jump out to a lot of people, but to me, they – the safeties that they went out and got, Quintavious Scandrett, Caleb Wooden, those were, kind of the guys I think that they were looking to come in, mix up with Akari Johnson and Larry Worth for those spots. And, Neal could end up playing nickel also, or one of the other guys. So we'll see how that shakes out. But they definitely added a lot of guys that have played football, good bit of football, and had success with it in the secondary. So we'll see if that boosts them. I was definitely a little concerned with the secondary coming out of the spring, so needed to add a guy like Neal. Phillip Lee is my other one. Again, maybe you put an asterisk beside this because he wasn't there in the spring. But they needed to go out and get a guy, a quality edge rusher, and this guy had 5 sacks last year. Talking with Danny West, and we'll bring him on in just a second, but talking with him, what's interesting about him is he came to college at 195 pounds, so he's a guy that's added 45 pounds since he's been to college. His first 2 years, I think he played at 220, played at 240 last season, got to the quarterback a lot in terms of pressures. I think he had like 20 pressures or something. But anyway, those would be my top 10 transfer portal additions. This does not have anything to do necessarily aside from maybe Neal, who's their highest ranked guy, with their rankings on 24/7 Sports. I like our ranking system. I don't know that I love all, and I base a lot of this out of, guys that have left Arkansas and gone somewhere else, and where they're ranked, like Patrick Kudus, for example. I think Patrick Kudus is a good player. Should he be ranked the number 13 transfer portal player in the country? I can't imagine. If that's true, then it's just not an outstanding transfer portal class overall. All right, let's get to Danny West. So Danny's traveling from Easter, so we're going to bring him in. Danny, can you hear me?
Hey, buddy. Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Let me know, everybody, if you can hear Danny from a volume standpoint. We might have you a little bit low. I can't tell. It might just be on my end, Danny.
All right. How's this sound?
Good. So obviously you're traveling for Easter, so we've got you over the phone today. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about this weekend. You had 4 guys visit and got all 4 of them. Were these just players that Arkansas identified? Obviously they identified them early, but were they like, all right, these are our guys that we're going after, and why do you think that was?
It sure seems that way, especially on a couple of them, the higher-ranked guys that you talked about there. Mm-hmm. Julian Neal, we'll start with him. I think the class now starts with Julian. It's fortunate for Arkansas, Trey. You mentioned coming out of spring, didn't feel great about the secondary, and we went into spring with a lot of questions about the secondary, did we not? So
Yeah.
you don't often see a 4-star top 5 transfer available fall into Arkansas's lap within a span of a few days. But I was talking to Julian after the fact and kind of had a good feeling leading up to the visit, but I didn't know for sure. I mean, he was telling me, I want to say the day he arrived in Fayetteville for his visit, which would have been last Thursday, he said, man, I'm getting an insane amount of calls. And usually that means, more visits coming. He's not just going to pick the first team he sees. But lo and behold, he did. And then after the fact, Trey, he told me yesterday, he said, man, I knew I was always going to be a Hog as soon as they called me. And I don't know why. I don't know what they threw at him or if it was just the need and the SEC flag flying. I don't know what it was, but obviously Coach Cal coming in had an impression on him. I know we're switching gears to basketball, but that really made an impact. They're on campus and suddenly you look up and you see a Hall of Famer coming through. That was pretty cool for him, but
yeah,
somewhat tongue in cheek there, but I'm sure.
Do you think Raylan Sharp? You think Raylan Sharp had anything to do with it?
Absolutely. He had a lot to do with it, and that's probably what kick-started it. Honestly, Raylan, that was the first name that Julian mentioned to me last week when I started talking to him. He said, man, Raylan is trying really hard. And that's what you want. Those guys played together at Fresno and, went to battle every day against each other, wide receiver corner duo. So long story short, Trey, I think he's the prize of the class so far, the spring class. Now, we're not talking December when they needed offensive linemen and so forth and receivers. But for this part, yeah, he's the stud. And then I'm with you on Phillip Lee. I heard what you said about him there. I think he's one of those interesting guys that you have to take a flyer on because, as you mentioned, he was 195 coming out. He had 3 offers. I want to say it was FIU, Georgia Southern, and Troy. And he picked, kind of the biggest name of those 3. Went to Troy, put on 25 in a redshirt year, played at 220 for back-to-back years as a redshirt freshman and a redshirt sophomore. Then he blows up to 240, which isn't huge, but that's a significant jump, when you've been 195 and 220. And man, you see the production there. I've got his numbers written here: 10 tackles for loss, 5 sacks, forced fumble, and a pass breakup. That's what you're looking for, man. You can't just go out and get another Landon, or a Drew Sanders coming off the edge, and they're just really tough to find. So I think this is kind of that next best thing where you get a guy who's maybe he's put up enough production and he's got enough measurables that maybe he's seen a glimpse at the NFL shot and he wants that opportunity to prove it against the best. And we've seen that work, not just at Arkansas, with Tesla and Armstrong and some of these. John Ridgway came from a small school, right? So we've seen that work out quite a bit. We'll see if it does again. But I like this kid. I like what I say kid. He's a senior now. But I like him. I like what he's talking about. And, anytime they say, well, they were looking for a dog and I'm a dog, sign me up. Be more like a dog.
Yeah. Yeah. Back on Neal, Danny, do you think, Arkansas brought in Jordan Young and Kenai Walker at cornerback also. Is there a chance that Neal could?
I think I know the question. Somebody's going to move.
Yeah. Somebody probably going to move.
Somebody's going to have to move around.
Yeah. Well, they've got Larry Worth working
especially
a lot there too, but I mean, obviously you need a lot of different looks. I mean, if you're lining up against Raylan Sharp covering him every week, you want Larry Worth there, covering covering him,
Right. But man, you look at the size of not just those two, but really all the corners they brought in. I mean, Kenai Walker's a big dude. You look at Jordan Young, kind of the same deal with Julian Neal. You look at him and you're thinking, man, well, this is the safety or the hybrid, backer. And really, you find out he's a corner at 6'2", 202. He looks like a stud. Just that group size overall. Keyshawn Davila, another big guy, kind of reminds you a little bit of the trend last year with Marquise Robinson coming in. They've kind of been going after the bigger corners here, so it wouldn't surprise me. Tall corners.
Yeah, Kenai's definitely not big.
right. Taller corners, Selman Bridges type, length. But I feel a little bit better about it now. after adding Neal, Trey, but you would know more about it. You've seen them every day, and just from where I sit, I would feel a little bit better having added these two. Don't want to forget Trent Wallen and Shakur Smalls, obviously, but it's kind of like coaches said last week. You hear coaches say, seems like everybody's kind of trading backups at some point. No disrespect, but that's part of it too. You got to have guys. And I know people always want the 4 and 5 star guys, but man, it's important to find depth, and especially at the positions they filled over the weekend. They had to have another safety, had to have another corner.
Yeah.
Needed a pass rusher, and I still think they want a defensive tackle, Trey. So
yeah. I would agree with that, Danny. I think in transfer portal age, you should have 5 ready to go defensive tackles. Not that Caleb Bell isn't a good player, going to be a good player, but I think he's number 5 right now as a true freshman. And portal age, you should be able to get 5. I think they've got 4. I look at it, Danny, like the offense, I think, is going to be better than they were last year. I just think with Talon in year 2, with a better offensive line, they should be better. They may not have an Andrew Armstrong or a Luke Hasz on this team, but I think that they're, man for man across the board better. And at the 2 most important positions, offensive line and quarterback, they're better. So if there can be better on offense, and if these additions in the secondary can improve, because, like, what are we trying to improve again? Like, are we freaking out over losing this guy or that guy in the secondary? This is a secondary that was dead last in the SEC in pass defense, 246 yards a game allowed. If the run support can be comparable to what it was last year, which was right in the middle of the pack, 7th, 129 yards per game allowed, and they can boost that pass defense and they can get better on offense, then maybe it can be better. Having said that, look at the schedule. It's always going to be brutal, but you got trips to Austin, Texas, Knoxville, Tennessee, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Oxford, Mississippi. You got Notre Dame coming in here. Brutal schedule at the same time. So they could end up, have a better team, but not be much better record-wise. Obviously we've discussed that, where Arkansas needs to get. So defensive tackle, Danny, is there anybody popping up on the radar just yet? I mean, every time I turn around, not turn around, just looking forward, I've got notifications popping up on my board from Chris Hummer and Matt Zenitz that somebody has entered the transfer portal.
Yeah. Not a ton so far. The one name that kind of hit the portal and caught interest was Marcus Burris. We just talked about, replacing Landon. Well, he played with Landon at Pleasant Grove and came out at the same time, I want to say. But, haven't seen a visit set up or anything. All I do know is that Arkansas, even after gaining these 4 over the weekend, it sounds like they still wanted one at defensive tackle. And, we're kind of all sitting back at the moment waiting to see who's going to get out of there. They're still over. And
I was getting to that.
I don't know what to make of that, but I feel like it could happen at any point where it's just going to be a rush of maybe, I don't even know, Trey, 3, 5. What kind of number are you expecting that's got
that has to leave? If they sign a defensive tackle?
If they've signed a defensive tackle. You talking 6?
5 got to go.
Okay, 5.
I've got him at 89 right now, Danny, which seems to be one off of what Sam Pittman has. I don't know if that means he already counted Quentin Murphy off a day before he entered the portal. But because I had him at 86 at that time, and he said 85. But I've got him at 89 and 90 if they sign a defensive tackle. So 5 quarterbacks, that's a good number of quarterbacks. I mean, you could technically get away with 4. I mean, I'll go ahead and tell you, Danny, you know this. I'll tell the audience listening, I've got 12 stories written in our admin.
Yeah.
We call them shells. I've got 12 stories written on the most likely guys to transfer out of here, just so we're ready to go, so we don't have to scramble and put something together when it happens. It feels weird writing so-and-so entered the transfer portal story when, 7 of those guys probably won't.
You got to, though.
But you have to. You have to be sitting on ready. Yeah. And so, I've got 12 guys in my mind that are the most likely to transfer. Quarterback, you got 5. You could get away with having 4. Running back, 6. That's probably a good number for a position group that sees a good number of injuries. And you run some 2-back sets. I do that 3 deep plus 1 model that I came up with. To where you have a 3 deep plus 1. So at running back, that would be 4 players, but also running back, you use a 2 running back set from time to time. So maybe you add 1 there, and, it is a position that sees some injuries, just like with quarterback too. I mean, I could say you should have 4 quarterbacks, but reality of that is it's a volatile position. So you need to make sure that you're in decent shape. I still think that they have a surplus at wide receiver with 12. I don't know who would be the guys to exit because everybody's either very young or they're a transfer addition. You got 5 transfers and a bunch of first year and second year guys. So tight end, I think the number is right there at 5, 15 offensive linemen. I would prefer to have 16, but 15 is the bottom number I would think you would have. Defensive end, they are at 8 now, which is, I think you need to be at either 7 or 8 defensive linemen, a defensive end and defensive tackle, either 7 ends or 8 ends, or 8 defensive tackles or 7 defensive tackles. I've got them at 9 defensive tackles. So I could look at that spot and say, maybe that there would be some attrition at defensive tackle. Because the numbers were right before they, the numbers were right at defensive tackle. Yeah. It's just like, is everybody contributing here? And we said that they need to add another one. So they got 9 defensive tackles, and 7 or 8 is the number.
That tells you they need better quality at some somewhere in there. That's what they're looking for.
I don't think 7 is a bad number at linebacker. And I've got him at 19 in the secondary now, which I've said 18 to me is the number. 18 defensive backs. It's safeties, corners, and nickels. So maybe that's a position you look at and say, does everybody belong?
Hey, good timing there. There was one more guy on the visit sheet, and we'll find out later today if they're still going to bring him in tomorrow. But that's another safety from UTEP. I don't want to forget about him in case they do still bring him in. I would tend to doubt it at this point, just based on the numbers we're talking about, and only one guy announcing that he's leaving so far. Doesn't feel like they're going to bring in another safety, but Dylan Williams is, or was at least, added to the visit list last week for tomorrow. And he's 5'11", 190, 34 tackles, had a pick and a pass breakup last year. So, but you got
to protect yourself too, though. I mean, because you may think what you have.
Last minute guys,
yeah. Well, Danny, last year before the portal opened, Pittman said he didn't think it was going to be a big thing for Arkansas because they had more money. And next thing you know, 26 guys have entered the portal out of Arkansas. So he didn't predict that, but there are players that. I wrote a dozen stories, but those are guys that make sense from, maybe they're not contributing, and they've been on campus for a few years now or a couple years. So there's that aspect of it, but there's also guys that, leave on their own that you don't expect. We saw that in the first portal window in the winter. But there's also possibly guys that are drawing, getting paid to play here that maybe they're even in a starting role, but maybe they think that they could do better. That could be a possibility too.
Where they say how that can go.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm with you on that. I don't love that we're sitting here Monday afternoon and still don't know. You know what I mean? It feels, you always wonder how many of these guys.
Now you cut out on me, Danny. I know you're traveling. Give you a couple beats. And that may be it. But we actually, it is time to wrap up from Danny. Danny, appreciate you, but we lost you. All right. So just 1 second. Kevin Bohannan is logging in now. So, but it is interesting that unless something has happened, but I don't see anything. I've got my eyes peeled. I told all our guys to keep their eyes peeled. There has not been any guys from Arkansas that have entered the transfer portal yet, aside from Quentin Murphy, and that was I believe on day one the transfer portal opened. So hasn't been any activity since then. And we're how many days in? It opened on the 16th, so this is day 5. And got another. It closes on the 24th. So something has to happen. Now that doesn't mean that these guys can't. It doesn't mean that they can't. Well, guys that have graduated can enter the portal basically anytime. But the 10-day window basically only means that these guys have that amount of time to enter the transfer portal. It doesn't mean that they can't withdraw, or excuse me, it doesn't mean that they can't go somewhere or withdraw. I guess they could do that too. All right, we're going to hop over to Kevin Bohannan now. For those of you who don't follow Kevin, he brings all of our Razorback baseball coverage to the table. Kevin, how's it going, man?
Hey, pretty good. Turned 44 today, so
happy birthday.
Appreciate
I forgot
it,
about that. You mentioned that to me the other day. It actually I won't say it worked out that they had the doubleheader and everything, but I know you had a birthday party on Saturday, so it's good you didn't have to cover Razorback baseball. But it's been an interesting twist, I guess, here in this part of the season because they started out so strong. They only lost 3 games, and then you look up and they've lost, 4 of the last 6 now.
Yeah, and against 2 good teams, and that's the big thing is, look, the front part of the SEC schedule was lighter than the back half is going to be, especially when you have top-ranked Texas who's sitting atop the SEC right now. Texas A&M is playing better than any team in the conference, and it showed this past weekend. A lot of people are, kind of, woe is me. This is typical Dave Van Horn, and this is the way it happens every year. They tied for the best start in school history the second straight year, and now they're losing 4 of their last 6 in conference play. So it's easy to look that route and say, okay, they're just going to end up with a dud like they did last year. I still don't think they've peaked early. They haven't played their best baseball yet. So you're getting some guys back from injury. Gage Wood pitched this last weekend. He only threw 20 pitches, only recorded 1 out. But Trey, he was only going to throw 1 inning, maybe 2 at the max if everything worked out right. He was going to throw a maximum of 30 pitches. So you wanted to put him in a situation to be able to start, and they were able to control that outcome. It didn't come back and bite them. They won that game 11-5. The problem on Friday evening was they scored 2 runs off sacrifice flies. You can't do that when the other team is hitting 462 with runners on base, and they're hitting 500 with runners in scoring position, and you're 0 for 8. That's the moral of the story right there. Baseball is all about numbers, and the numbers always tell a story.
Is it fair to be like saying stuff like typical Dave Van Horn and all this stuff when they're second in the SEC, knowing good and well that we would kill, not literally, but kill to have a standing like that in football?
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that I did my first version of a talking type. It was 11 o'clock when the doubleheader was done, thanks to a lightning delay. So I wasn't able to do a walk and talk. Patton did Trey Biddy walk and talk. So I did a talking type just to kind of get my thoughts of the series and where the program is at right now in the 2025 season. And I think it was very productive. Fans got to get stuff off their chest, and we really got to take a deep dive into what is different about this year. So I think it really changed the opinion of a lot of the fans out there when I really broke it down of, okay, this is how this is different right now. Look at the progression that these guys have made. Yeah, there have been some injuries. There have been 3 key injuries this year with Nolan Sousa, Gage Wood, Parker Coyle, and you're going to get 2 of those back. The coaching staff has to figure out what they're going to do at second base with Nolan Sousa. Personally, I think Gabe Frazier should be in there every game, get as many reps as he can. That gives the Razorbacks the best defensive lineup, and with everybody in the lineup hitting at a good clip this season, some go through slumps, some go through struggles. But it's hard to wrap your brain around baseball not being the same as football or basketball in terms of losses. In a game of failure, you think if you win 2 out of 3, that's a great weekend. If you win your first 2 out of 3 in football this coming up season, there's going to be a lot of questions.
Yeah, it's interesting how it works like that. Florida up next. Florida hasn't been great this season. They're 27-15, 6-12 in SEC play. What are your thoughts on the series coming up? I know I'm jumping over Little Rock, but everybody,
Yeah.
nothing against Little Rock.
Yeah, the two in-state losses that Arkansas has to in-state schools are to Little Rock, believe it or not. But Little Rock's playing well, but we'll get to Florida. Florida is a tough place to play at. They have underperformed. Kevin O'Sullivan brought his team into the season, a top 10 team consensus, no matter what poll you look at, one of the 6 that are out there, and they just haven't performed. I think it's more of the SEC is tougher than what a lot of national prognosticators thought it would be, especially when you have 6 of the top 12 teams in the nation. You got Texas, who is playing above their weight class right now. So some of the teams that were expected to do well coming into the season have fallen off. Texas A&M was one of those teams. Now they're trying to get back on track. They're expected to be in the field of 64 at the end of the year as a 3 seed. And if they keep playing like they did this past weekend, they'll end up a 2. Florida can get back in that conversation as well. They're a younger team. They lost quite a bit to the draft and graduation last year, but they brought in a talented freshman class that our fans will get to know a lot this week. I've already got it scheduled to talk with our 24/7 cohort down there in Gainesville. So a lot to look forward to this weekend as the Hogs get down to Gainesville. And the tough thing about this week, it's a 5-game week coming off 2 straight series loss. So how the team bounces back will be a sign of how they can finish the season.
And quickly, what do you think about the series, the 2-game series against Little Rock, excuse me?
Yeah, I think Arkansas should sweep both of them. I think Dave Van Horn wants to make a statement of this team is focused. That was one of the questions that got brought up the last couple of weeks, especially when they came down to Little Rock or North Little Rock and played Grambling at Dickey-Stevens Park and only won that game 7-3, 7-4. Are they lacking focus at this time? So at this point, you got a 5-game stretch and then the really tough part of the schedule. Arkansas needs to win these 2 games this week, then win the series in Gainesville. So I think they will be locked in this week and at best 4-1.
4-1.
4-1 on the week.
What have you thought of? You've been, I know you've jumping ship here a little bit, but you've been following football. Obviously, you live in Arkansas. You've followed the Razorbacks your entire life and stuff. What do you think about what's going on with the team based on everything you've heard from the spring and some of these transfer portal additions?
Yeah, I was going through the board reading this morning about being ranked 16th in the transfer portal and why there's not much emphasis put on that when there's so many players that come in from the portal versus a high school class that play right away. So it's a matter of perspective with how you look at the guys that are brought in. I really like the offense the way it's set up right now with is it Chase or the guy that come in on the wide receiver 84?
Oh, CC. Ismail CC. Yeah.
There we go. So I really, really like him. I think this offense has the ability to be more explosive this year. The portal pickups this past weekend, when anytime you can get a 6'2", 205 cornerback is a plus any day in my book, especially with how physical you have to be in space right now. If you can get somebody on the edge that can be physical like that, you got to upgrade with your defensive backfield right there.
All right, Kevin. Anything else you want to add before we cut you loose?
Hey, pay attention, HawgSports this week. We still got minor league baseball Razorbacks. We looked at the pitchers last week and how their season has started. We'll take a look at the position players this week and a lot of good coverage at hawgsports.com.
All right. Appreciate you, brother.
All right. Thanks, Trey.
All right, everybody. That's Kevin Bohannan. You can follow him at Coach K-Bo, Baseball Guru. Hell, that's not right. That isn't it. K-Bo, Baseball Guru on X. That's it. Follow him and, of course, read all of his content at HawgSports. It's not just like the articles and game recaps and previews and stuff like that, but just the interaction that you get on the Razor's Edge VIP forum where our doors really just don't ever close. So come check us out at HawgSports. Get all of Kevin and Danny, of course, baseball and recruiting information. And all of us are kind of all hands on deck or football. And Connor Goodson, who we didn't have on the show today, Connor just put out an article about big names still entering the transfer portal as basketball season as basketball rounds out the roster. So for all the updates on what's going on there, obviously Nate Ament, who was a prime target of Arkansas's, 5-star McDonald's All-American, committed to Tennessee over the weekend. He's got a lot of information on why that happened and several other guys to keep an eye on. I'm looking at probably 6 names that he's got to keep an eye on right now in his latest article. It is a VIP story, so you need to sign up at HawgSports to get that. Okay. We're going to go to some questions now. I'm first going to go to the Razor's Edge VIP forum, see what people have. And right at the top is a question that was just asked from Chad Razorback. Why does it seem like a top portal class doesn't get the same love as a recruiting class? We had the 16th ranked portal class, and nobody seems to be excited. If we had the 16th recruiting class, I feel like it would be a really big deal. So there's one reason that I would say is a reason for that. Let me bring that up real quick before I go into it. Football recruiting team rankings. Okay, transfer. We're not in 2026. We are in 2025. So the number 1 ranked team in the country in the transfer portal ranking is Texas Tech. LSU is number 2. That's a big one. Ole Miss, Oregon, Miami, Missouri, Auburn, Florida State, Kentucky. Okay, you catch the drift here. Where's Alabama? Where's Georgia? Right? Where's some of these big name schools? Georgia's at 22 nationally. Why? Well, they don't dip in the transfer portal that much. They got 9, which is way more than I bet they ever thought that they would get when Kirby Smart said it's not a big deal for them because they're not bottom feeders. But Georgia's at 22. Alabama has 10 commitments. They're at 21. Okay, so you got to remember that there's quality and quantity that goes into this. Arkansas is at number 16. So does that mean Arkansas is going to have a better team, this year than Alabama and Georgia? No, Alabama and Georgia have recruited extremely well, build their program up that way. For a team like Arkansas, I have said numerous times that that's not the path, because Arkansas doesn't have the recruiting base that Georgia or Alabama has. They're more remote. So being able to get guys out of the transfer portal, I think, is big for them. Will revenue sharing be big? Will that even the playing field for Arkansas in a sense? We'll see how that plays out. We're still in the Wild West, but we'll see how that plays out. But Arkansas is 16th right now. A lot of that is because they have, 26 commitments. Does anybody else have 26 commitments out of the transfer portal? Ole Miss has 27. Every team ranked above Arkansas has fewer transfer portal commitments. Quality and quantity factors into rankings. So that's one reason that Arkansas is 16th right now. But yes, if Arkansas had the 16th ranked recruiting class in the country, people would be doing backflips. Hogs456 says, what can we get out of Young and Walker? That would be Kenai Walker and Jordan Young. Will Young move to Hog? It's a good question. I don't know, because he didn't practice at all in the spring. What can we get from Boone and Talley? That's Justice Boone and Ken Talley. Have they been hurt this spring? No, neither of those guys have been hurt. Talley, hell, I don't know what I can say on injuries. We have an agreement that, to get access to practice, we can't comment on injuries, so I'm just going to avoid that question. I did not see from either of those guys, looking at him, I didn't see this guy's going to start here. He's going to be a really good player. I think Boone more than Talley has that potential. I think of Boone is probably going to be one of their top 4 defensive ends. Talley, probably third team. But what I'm looking at with defensive end, Quincy Rhodes, is he better than Landon Jackson? No. Is he better than Nico Davier? I think he can be better than Nico. Charlie Collins, is he better than Nico? Right now, I don't think so. So to me, if you're going to even things out at defensive end, then you get Quincy Rhodes, who's better than Nico, and then you get another guy better than Nico, right? And that maybe kind of balances out. You've got 2 guys somewhere between Nico Davier and Landon Jackson. Maybe that balances things out a little bit at that position. I think that Charlie Collins has a lot of potential. I just don't know that he's quite there physically. But someday, Charlie Collins, I think, will be a real player for him, and probably one of their top 3 ends this year. Whoopig Sui, WPS 88 says, we have the 16th ranked Portal Hall simply because we have 25. He's just answering the question. Matt 1981 says, which position do you see being a bigger need to fill the last few days of the portal, defensive tackle or a big physical X receiver? Defensive tackle, I think they have done basically the work at wide receiver. I do like what I've seen from Omega Blake lately. Is he Andrew Armstrong? I don't think so. I also did not think Andrew Armstrong was going to be Andrew Armstrong back in 2023, the first year he was here. And he ended up being the best receiver they had. I wasn't sure that he was going to be that. So it's important to note that. But I think that, first of all, they probably need a little attrition at wide receiver. I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but they probably need that because they have 12 wide receivers. That's a little too many. And secondly, Monte Harrison has also been pretty good. Again, I don't look at this wide receiver group and say this is a upper tier wide receiver core, but I think that they're going to be good enough for how Arkansas can operate things with a Bobby Petrino offense. They have guys that can get open and will catch the ball. Do they have guys that can make a difference, can make this massive play, even though the defense is in good coverage? I don't know that yet. I think Omega Blake would be their best option to do that. Miss Sui says, if this team was to win 8 games, what went right? A lot. They answered some questions in the secondary, obviously, because that was a problem for them last year. They answered some questions on the defensive line, and I think probably the most obvious answer would be they won some shootouts if they win 8+. I mean, you look at the schedule. Let's look at the schedule real quick. I know it's tough every year. I know. It's the SEC. Arkansas football schedule. Okay. Obviously, Alabama A&M coming out August 30th. Arkansas State September 6th. This is one reason, we talk about, Sam Pittman, and people argue whether or not he should have been fired last year. And we talked about revenue sharing and needing to carve out $20.5 million. Is it a good idea to pay, $15 million in buyouts and all that kind of stuff? But also like the issues you run into with building your roster for the next season with a late start in the transfer portal and all the attrition that you're going to have. Is that the year that you want to play Arkansas State? The year that you're just completely starting over? Because you can't drop that game. But that's game 2 in Little Rock. Arkansas State is going to come with everything they've got. But Arkansas is going to beat them because they've got a good enough team and hopefully good enough motivation. But if they'd had a changeover, that might be up for debate. Right out of the gate, you're on the road. Of course, you're on the road for your SEC opener at Ole Miss. Then you're at Memphis. This is just ridiculous that they have to play at Memphis in a stadium that's going to be limited with seating because it's under construction. So this is how you start out. Alabama A&M, at least it's in Fayetteville. Your opener should be in Fayetteville. At Arkansas State and Little Rock. At Ole Miss. At Memphis. I say at Arkansas State, just against Arkansas State. And then it's Notre Dame in Fayetteville. I think we know Notre Dame was pretty good last year. I would expect them to be pretty good this year. And then you're at Tennessee. So your first 2 SEC games are on the road. Yay. So that's brutal. That's a brutal way to start your season. Ole Miss is going to be good. Memphis should be good. Notre Dame's going to be good. Tennessee should be good. I'm sure they'll get quarterback figured out. By the way, it's interesting that Nico Iamaleava looks like going to end up at UCLA, which is where Madden Iamaleava was committed before he flipped to Arkansas. So they thought they had Madden Iamaleava, and now they're going to end up with Nico, the older brother. It's kind of weird. Then you get Texas A&M in Fayetteville. Hallelujah. First time Texas A&M has played in Fayetteville since Johnny Manziel was quarterback. Then you get Auburn in Fayetteville. Then you get Mississippi State in Fayetteville. So that's a nice little stretch there. If you can survive this opening gauntlet, you get 3 home games against SEC teams that you should have a chance or should be favored to beat. Auburn obviously trying to bounce back from a bad season last year. Texas A&M is usually always a competitive game at a neutral site, and Mississippi State was terrible last year. They'll be better. Then you go at Baton Rouge, at Texas, Missouri, and Fayetteville, who's had your number. So it's, again, very, very difficult schedule. Arkansas should not be playing the Notre Dames of the world in non-conference. Play Oklahoma State. Play BYU. Play teams that are on the Power 5 level that maybe should be a little better than. Although they've lost to BYU and Oklahoma State the last times they played them. But, playing series against Notre Dame and Michigan and stuff like that, and USC, maybe not USC now, but, it's just – why are you scheduling those games? You should be scheduling that type of stuff if you're – regularly winning 9, 10, 11 games. Those should be the matchups you have. 1, 2, 3. There's a bunch of numbers I see you on here. You've been on there forever, 80 months. But you said, Sam seems refreshed and in a good frame of mind going into 2025. Do you think he gets to 2026? I think he's become a pretty good coach. I think Sam Pittman did a lot of learning how to be a head coach the first few years. And that was kind of in the situation that Arkansas was in. They just couldn't get anybody to take the job. I mean, that's the bottom line, and landed on Sam Pittman. I just read off the schedule, so I'm not going to try to get coaches fired in April. But I don't think 6 wins is going to cut it again. I thought last year that he needed to win 8 games. And I thought maybe they could have won 8 games last year. But obviously the revenue sharing thing and some other things kind of changed how teams approached. There was not a lot of coaching turnover last year. And I think a lot of it's because of the revenue sharing stuff. NEA Hog 12 says, is Phillip Lee seen as a legit contender to start a defensive end style? I think he is based on what I saw in the spring. Same question for Neal, expected to start, at least push for a spot. Neal is the highest ranked transfer that they've added, so I would hope that he would do that. I would hope that they got a guy, because I'm not just in love with what I saw at a cornerback. And again, Young was hurt, Walker was hurt, Young was out. I can talk about them because Pittman did, as far as injuries go. But Young was out the whole spring. But based on what I saw, yeah, I think Selman Bridges is a good bet to start on one side. That's good because he was very highly regarded. It's a big – I was getting in an argument with a guy on YouTube. He's like, what are these guys? I posted a video of just, defensive back drills. He's like, these guys are 5'4". I was like, look, you can say that they're terrible, but saying that they're all short, they're not. Larry Worth is every bit of 6'4". Go stand next to Larry Worth. You see just how big that guy actually is. 6'4", Scandrett 6'3". You got several guys that are 6'2", 6'1". It's a pretty big secondary, in my opinion, based on what Arkansas has had in the past. I just thought that was kind of comical. A guy who has no frame of reference at all, not even seeing guys standing next to somebody who he knows what their height is. These guys are all so short. If Arkansas has another 6-6 season, this is from Thor Hog, in 2025, in your opinion, Trey Biddy is Sam Pittman the head coach in 2026. Let's not get into the should he be fired in April. Let's just not. But I think we all know 6-6 just, 6-6 in year 6, after 6-6, after 7-6, after 4 and 8. I don't have to answer that question. You all guys, you know the answer. Packing a Hog 54 says, does AJ Green appear to have the same burst and speed? AJ looks bigger to me than he has. He's still got some, but I think, was it Petrino that said it? This is a guy that ran like a 10-4, 100 meters in high school. I don't know that you see that necessarily translate to the football field. Will Rodney Hill have an increased role this season? Rodney looks bigger too. Both of those guys look bigger than I remember Green from 2 years ago and Hill last year. But I think it's kind of in tiers. I think you have Rodney Hill might have been the number 2 back last year, maybe number 3, but he was definitely one of those. I think maybe he was 2 when healthy. But no, I think maybe a little bit of a decreased role, because I do think that Braylon and Mike Washington are your 1-2, and then I think, your 3-4 guys are AJ Green and Rodney Hill, and then kind of everybody else after that. He had a good scrimmage. Saturday before last, he popped off a 40-yard run, second team, but he had a good scrimmage. If Russell Washington, we need both. They definitely provide a change path. And Rodney Hill, as I said, is bigger than he was last year. What defensive tackles are we targeting in the portal now, says Cole Tapp? That's probably a good question for Danny, but I don't know that any names have necessarily emerged right now. But to me, it's not so much they need a starting defensive tackle, because they have Cam Ball coming back, who I think has potential to play on the next level. Ian Ford, Danny Saili, who may be the most improved player on the team. I was really pleased with what I saw out of Danny Saili. So they got those three guys, and they added David Oakey from Abilene Christian. I don't look at David Oakey and see, this is a guy that's going to have 64 tackles again like he did at Abilene Christian last year. He's not huge. He's 6'2", 300 something. I don't even know if he's quite 6'2". But, that's four that you should feel decent about getting in the game. Caleb Bell would be the fifth. So you can go out and get another veteran defensive tackle who can play for you if needed. It's not so much that like you need five, it's just that people get banged up. So you need five, yes, but like on paper, you need a two deep. Not asking for a prediction this early, but how does this team stack up against past teams? I'm not so sure across the board that they're better than last year. I do think the offensive line is better, and I think quarterback is better. That alone, to me, should translate to a better offense, obviously, in spite of them maybe not having a wide receiver like Andrew Armstrong or a tight end like Luke has. Maybe not a running back like Quentin Jackson, although I think that Braylon Russell is just as capable when healthy. Defensively, not as good on the defensive line. Probably about as good at linebacker if Bradley Shaw can be as good as Brad Spence was. And secondary, I think that they have a chance to be better with the addition of Neal. I like Larry Worth. I think Larry Worth has potential. This is a guy that's every bit of 6'4", 225, has a 40.8-inch vertical leap. That was from August. He's told me it's 41. I just know verified from that it's 40.8. But he's an athlete back there. I might be a little bit higher on Miguel Mitchell than a lot of people are. I think a lot of people are down on Miguel Mitchell. I'm not as down on him. You did not have Jalen Braxton for all but 2 games last year. So like you can look at it, obviously, look at it and say that's a loss. He was probably Arkansas's best cornerback, but he didn't play last year. James Singletary hasn't been what you thought you were going to get, but Selman Bridges has looked good so far. And, you brought in a guy that started at Oklahoma, a guy that started at Cincinnati, and then Neal, this latest guy, who's their highest ranked transfer portal addition. So I would hope that they would be better, but what is better? They could still be bad and be better than they were last year because they were, again, dead last in the SEC. All right, let's see if we got any other questions on here, and we'll check out and see if we got any questions on the other page. Okay, we're caught up there. We run into just a lot of comments on our deal, which we love the comments. If you haven't left a comment, then do so. If you haven't signed up for our newsletter, you can go to HawgSports and just kind of scroll, and you see all you have to do is enter your email address, and you can cancel it at any time. But most of the content that we send on our newsletter is free articles. We might put the occasional VIP. It's clearly labeled that it's VIP, so you don't click it and run into a paywall if that's not what you're into. But and also you should sign up for our text alerts, which are all free. And it's just alerts like so-and-so committed, so-and-so entered the transfer portal. Pretty quick after it happens, we'll post an article, we'll text alert it, and we'll send that out. I'll retweet Connor Goodson. He's got a good article that he just put out. As the close of college basketball transfer portal window nears, here's a look at where Arkansas roster currently stands, remaining needs, and most likely targets. Clearly marked VIP. So if you don't have a VIP subscription, you should sign up, HawgSports.com. White Mojo Wolf says blue light specials. So I don't necessarily agree with that. I understand the propensity to be negative about where the football program is. Trust me, I totally get that. But Neal is not a blue light special. That guy is a guy that a lot of teams wanted. Lee, I think, is another good addition here late. And last year, if you look at it, they got some, Steven Dix was a nice addition for them last year. Larry Worth's a nice addition. They got Rodney Hill late. You can get good late additions. And I think more and more as we move to this new model of revenue sharing, guys like Xavier and Sori aren't going to be just sitting there in the transfer portal. Georgia's just going to pay them. They're going to pay them more to stick around. So I think a lot of what we're seeing now is a move to guys who play from Group of 5 schools or FCS schools, which there have been plenty of good guys that have come to Arkansas from those levels. John Ridgway was an FCS player. Andrew Armstrong was an FCS player. Isaac Teslaw was Division II. So there have been plenty of examples of guys that come to Arkansas from those types of levels who are good players. And there are a couple of different kinds of transfers. There's guys that you can get that are, sure, future NFL guys. A lot of those guys tend to be a little bit younger. But there's also players who have played a lot of football who are veterans that end up being really good players at Arkansas. I mean, I would take another Anthony Switzer right now. I mean, that's a veteran linebacker who gave them, quality snaps. He wasn't a starter, but a quality player. And in the past, that guy would have been, a freshman. So there are good players that you can get in the transfer portal, but no. Do I think, the linebacker they just got is going to be a game changer for them? No. Do I think Smalls from Maine is going to be a game changer? No, but they also needed numbers. And sometimes you need to be able to, get through practice, have quality second teams, have quality scout teams. Those are all part of it too. So numbers at safety were just down overall. But to me, they invested in safety and the guys that they have returning and the 2 additions they got to the transfer portal before they ever hit the April window. Clint F. says, is it safe to come back to the Razor's Edge 6+ years sub here left? The constant negativity and trolling from the same posters. We have cleaned out a few guys, I will say that. It just gets a little old with the same bitching about the same stuff over and over again. So, yes. For those of you who don't know about the Razor's Edge, it is one of the most active forums in the entire country, and it's dedicated to Razorback sports. There have been times where we have led the nation in activity, for months at a time. So it's a great forum. It gets deterred like anywhere else. X, wherever, Facebook, with a few people using it as their own personal playground, but we do try to clean it up and keep things on topic. Okay. GBR Ike says, what are your thoughts on our baseball team? I think we covered that pretty well. So that I think was asked before Bohannan came on. Raylan Sharp used to play with Smackover great Jordan Jones. Yep, Jordan Jones, who played at Arkansas. And then I'm not sure where Jordan went after Arkansas, but he eventually ended up at Missouri State and played under Petrino. I believe he had a pretty good game against Arkansas also. Dwayne Alt says, hey, Trey, love your show. You're the best in the state. Are we out on Kane Archer? They have another quarterback commitment in the class. I don't know if I would say that they're out on Kane Archer. Archer, I believe, is the number 9 ranked prospect in the state of Arkansas right now. They have Javon Gilmore, who I hear a lot of people think that he has a chance to like really move up the rankings. He is the number 22 ranked quarterback prospect in the country. He's a shade under 5-star status, is an 89 on 24/7 Sports. Number 4 overall player in South Carolina with a pretty big time offer list. 6'5", 195. But that's a guy that they targeted. But as we know, that doesn't mean they won't. And quarterback's a volatile position. This, I'm not saying he's not going to end up at Arkansas, but we see stuff like that happen all the time. Look at Madni Amaliava was committed to UCLA up until the point of National Signing Day. So you never know what's going to happen at quarterback, and it's pretty rare for Arkansas to take 2. Again, having said that, they took 2 in last year's class, and it is a volatile position. Sometimes you need to take 2. I don't know that Arkansas is going to be super active in the transfer portal at quarterback after this. I think if everything like stays the same, coaching staff, stays intact and all that stuff, I think when it's all said and done that Madni Amaliava will be the next starting quarterback at Arkansas. If he doesn't, end up leaving, which happens. His brother did. Like my shirt, Crested Butte. Yeah, Crested Butte's a good ski town. There's a lot of people from Fayetteville that go to Crested Butte over spring break. I bet there were 40 families from Fayetteville that went there this past spring break. How good is a receiver supposed to be coming from Madden school? So he's coming from Poly. Let's see. Let's take a look at him real quick. Chase Brown. Let me bring back up 2025 recruiting class. So Brown is the second highest rated receiver in the class, I think. Jacaden Ferguson is the highest rated. Jacaden Ferguson, I believe, broke his arm. I saw it happen in spring. Let's see. What is Chase Brown? Oh, he's right. He's listed over in signed letter of intent but hadn't enrolled. So Chase Brown is actually tied with Jacaden Ferguson, 6'4", 200. They talk about him. They like him. I mean, they talk about him a lot. He was supposed to enroll early but did not. I don't know what hiccup came up, but he was not able to enroll early. But he had offers from UCLA, Arizona, Notre Dame, Kansas, Minnesota, Utah, Washington State. So he has a pretty decent offer list. 6'4", 200. They like him. They talk as far as guys that aren't enrolled. They talked about him a good bit, and talked about Antonio Jordan a good bit. Which Jordan is, how big is he? He's like 6'6" or something. Antonio Jordan out of Warren is 6'6", 230. I mean, if they get somebody out of Warren, he's going to be good, right? But is he going to play wide receiver long term? That's a big wide receiver. I was looking at this earlier because I was thinking about it. Like in the NFL, who are the wide receivers like that are 6'4" or taller? I don't think that there are a lot. I think once you like the best wide receivers, it seems like as far as like outside guys, seem to be about 6'3". 6'6" seems pretty tall. Anybody got a question? Anybody got a response to that? Let me know in the comments and see if we can get to it before we run out. But we're going 69 minutes. Nice. So far, we usually go an hour, but I've been going a little long because we've been doing these about one day a week. Montana State tight ends are good receivers. Yeah, I like Rohan Jones. Like from the first day I saw him, I liked him. I was like, this guy looks the part physically, and he made a couple of nice catches. Thinking like, this guy could be a good player. How are the JUCO's players coming along? I think they got a good one in Bubba Craig. It's just I think the offensive line is a lot better. Like Bubba Craig, to me, probably would have started on last year's offensive line. This year, he's the backup left tackle. No, he's a backup left guard at 6'8", which is interesting. So he's looked good. I've said before, the improvement with the backup offensive line is dramatic. I think there's definitely improvement with the starting group, but the backup group is like there was one guy last year and Kobe Branham that I looked at and said that guy might start here one day. So Keyshawn Davila is the other guy who I really like. He's just light, as Danny mentioned, big corner, but he's taller, 6'1" or so. But he is only 165 pounds and doesn't have the frame to get much bigger, but he does play pretty physical. He'll, stick his nose in there. I just felt like out of all the cornerbacks, the guy that made the most plays all spring in terms of like breaking up passes was Keyshawn Davila. CB is a cool town. I worked there for a year. The little gas station, Gassers had a mean breakfast sandwich. So Crested Butte, the Breadery, I think, was my favorite restaurant. I've been there 3 times now. I like Stash, the pizza place. I like Bones, the Mexican restaurant there. It was really good. No, I like Crested Butte a lot. It's good for kids. It's spring break, so it's not the best snow that you can get, but we have a blast every year. The only thing, like, people talk about Colorado and loving the weather and all this stuff, and we go to Colorado a decent bit. My wife has 2 brothers who live out there, who both basically just moved out there. One of them got a job, and the other one visited, and he liked it, and he moved out there. But like during the winter, like, yes, everybody talks about the weather and the summer, and it's nice to go outside and not sweat stuff. But man, like, so my Apple Watch tracks my heart rate and stuff, and I got a notice that said the last 20 days your resting heart rate has improved, basically. And like the 8 days that I was in Colorado, my resting heart rate was 75, and when I got back to Arkansas, my resting heart rate has been 56 over a 20-day span. So elevated heart rate. Every time I bend over to tie my shoelaces, I raise up and I'm out of breath. We had those boost oxygen things. Just a sore, crusty nose. Just like sore and crusty. Can't breathe at night because your mouth breathing. Yes, Colorado's nice and stuff, but like that kind of stuff, I don't know if I ever had a good night's sleep, And despite, probably, obviously drinking probably every day. There are a lot of people there, a lot of friends. It's hard not to. So yeah, maybe that was part of the sleeping issues too. All right. So Brady 111 says, who's going to leave or change positions? 17 is way too much. 17. What do you mean 17? Defensive backs? I think there are 19 defensive backs, aren't they? Which is just one over what they should be at. But yeah, they're going to have attrition. No question. I've got 12 stories written for at least 5 guys that have to go. The days of like being a good locker room guy, make your grade, show up to everything, never cause any problems, but maybe you weren't that good a player. The days of that guy making it all the way through the program are done. That guy doesn't make it through the program anymore. It's a shame because there have been some great guys I know of that were Razorbacks that, fit that kind of category. I've got a couple that just like kind of flash through my head right now, but that guy's not around anymore. Brady says, our D is going to be really good. The corner we got is supposed to be big time. He's 6'3", 200. Really good is probably a bit of a stretch. I do love this defensive coaching staff. Marcus Woodson, Travis Williams, Nick Perry, who I don't really know a whole lot about, I guess, Deke Adams. I do like that defensive coaching staff a lot, but really good. That would have to be quite a turnaround. That was a disappointment to me. Like, if you look at Marcus Woodson's recent history of being a secondary coach, like at Florida State, they got significantly better each year, all the way to where they were like number 6 in the country in pass defense. So Arkansas had done that from year 1 to year 2, but then they dropped off really bad last year. Kenny James says, Bray Titty. Yeah. My alter ego. Bray Titty ain't no joke. I don't know if I can say titty. All right. Trey Biddy has the best perspective. He's truly one of a kind and once in a generation talent. That's very sweet of you. Thanks, Kenny. What are you doing, Kenny? So, Trey Biddy always has the inside scoop on Razorback football. If I were on my deathbed and got to be part of the Make-A-Wish Foundation, I would only ask to see the Hogs through Trey Biddy's eyes. This sounds like some, I don't know. Let's move on. Immediately, Trey Biddy goes live. I immediately tell people around me to shut up so I can listen to his words of wisdom and peace, serenity, and clarity. That's funny. They didn't get rid of Broden. Brady says we got rid of Broden. Broden ran out of eligibility. Danny's reporting live from Save-A-Lot parking lot. You may not be far off, Kenny. You may not be far off. They play better on the road. I was asked by a former player why Arkansas struggles so much. This was Friday. Why Arkansas struggles so much at home. But they do. I don't know why, but they have not. What did they do last year? Let's get a refresher. Arkansas football schedule, 2024. So last year, they beat the dog out of UAPB in Little Rock. Then they lost. They played really well to start out, and then just after that interception, just lost it against Oklahoma State. Too many mistakes. They played really poorly against UAB, only won 37-27. A 10-point win, but just not play. I felt like Taylor Green was pressing. They got down it was like 17-0 or something at one point. Played terrible at home. Then went on the road and beat Auburn. Played Texas A&M close in Arlington, but made too many mistakes. Beat Tennessee. They beat Tennessee at home last year, so that's definitely notable. Tennessee was number 4 in the country when they played, and that was Sam Pittman's biggest win ever at Arkansas. So they got that one. Then they got hammered 2 weeks later at home by LSU. That was a game where the offensive line really cost them. Witt, whatever his name was, made that big play and just changed the game. So they played like dog against LSU ultimately. Beat the tar out at Texas A&M, came back, got the crap beat out of them against Ole Miss, lost by 10 to Texas, which, I mean, I'm not saying that's a respectable loss because I don't mean that, but mistakes, man. I mean, that's C.J. Brown fumble. They're driving down the field, going to make it a one-score game, and they fumble the ball. LSU, they let somebody get into the backfield, and he tips the ball in the air and intercepts it at the 2-yard line. Texas A&M was on the road twice. Taylor Green's handing the ball off, and somebody hits him before he can make the handoff, and he fumbles it. Like, stuff like that. Oklahoma State, you miss an assignment, your quarterback gets drilled, interception, 2 mistakes on special teams. One of them causes a muff. Like, stuff like that is why you lose games. Like, we can sit here and talk about all the stuff that Arkansas has done in the transfer portal, and maybe they got so much better personnel-wise. But if you don't make better decisions with the ball, if you don't protect the football, if you don't stop making foolish penalties, those are the types of things that decide games. Like, look at Texas and say 20-10, yeah, they lost by 2 scores. They should have gone down there and scored, but you throw to, like, first of all, like, we can say it's C.J. Brown's fault, and it obviously partly is. He's the guy that had the ball with the nose up, carrying it like this, and gets it poked out. Why was he in the game? I remember asking after that game, Isaiah Satania, he was targeted the play before that. He came off the field. Was that play called for Isaiah Satania, but he came off the field, and maybe you didn't know CJ was in there. But no, that they worked on that play with CJ. He was the intended player to be in there. Why is he in that critical situation? Like, stuff like that. Stuff like that. Taylor Green, like, they didn't cost them against Texas Tech, but taking that sack, like when you knew you got to get the ball out, you take a sack in your own end zone, giving up a safety. Like, against Missouri. I mean, I don't know how many times I said that the team that doesn't turn the ball over and doesn't commit a lot of penalties is going to win, because all you really had to do was run the ball. And Arkansas was having so much success doing that. But if you get behind the chains, if you get a penalty, it makes it extremely difficult to convert a first down. And Arkansas turned the ball over in that game, and they had penalties, and they lost 28-21. All they had to do was not do those things. They could just run the ball in, call 38 over and over again if they wanted to, and been fine and probably won the game. But they were the team that made the mistakes. So until that kind of stuff gets fixed, Arkansas is never going to take a step forward. Not always. It happens less, but for like in 2023, a big reason that Arkansas went 4-8 is because it seemed like every single time that they needed to kick a field goal, they went for it and didn't get it, or they needed to punt, they went for it and didn't get it. It's like they made the wrong choice over and over again when it came to those situations. So got to get better. Clock management, making the right call in those types of critical situations, and not turning the ball over and making critical penalties. Penalties happen, but like procedure penalties, that stuff's got to be limited. You got to take that out of the equation. So not a great showing at home, although they did beat Tennessee at home. And then the year before that, a lackluster showing against Kent State, a Kent State team that's terrible. BYU, the way BYU came back and beat them, a BYU team, maybe they were good last year. That year that they beat Arkansas, they won 5 games, including beating Arkansas. And then you go lose by 3 in Baton Rouge. You lose to Texas A&M in Arlington, which Texas A&M I felt was playing really good football at that time. Then you go at Ole Miss and lose by 7, at Alabama lose by 3, and then you come home and play maybe the worst game I've ever seen. You lose 7-3 to a terrible Mississippi State team at home that results in your offensive coordinator being fired. Then you go on the road and beat Florida. And then you come home and just get the dog beat out of you by Auburn, an Auburn team that wasn't good, that didn't win another game the rest of the year. Then you beat Florida International 44-20. I mean, okay. And then you turn around and get the crap kicked out of you by Missouri, 48-14 in Fayetteville. That wasn't last year. That was the year prior. But like stuff like that's gotta change. In the Papa J Rod, I'd rather have over a scholarship problem than an under one. Yeah, but you got to get it figured out. Tennessee with a new quarterback doesn't scare me, and all the pressure will be on Texas and LSU and Ole Miss. I mean, they'll get some of those. I mean, not some of them. I mean, they're not going to lose every one of those, I don't think. I think things would really spiral, but we'll see how it shakes out. What's the percentage J-Rod says that Jordan Anthony is sticking to track? So I'm not including Jordan Anthony on our scholarship distribution. I'm not including him among 12 wide receivers right now. I thought it was just kind of interesting the way Pittman was talking about it, because he's basically telling us that we'll see what happens with Jordan Anthony in track. Well, we hadn't really thought that he wasn't going to rejoin the football team necessarily, but he basically said that he wasn't. But he said we'll address it later. So to me, I think he's probably sticking with track. Last 2 years, Bobby said, we'll be good at running back. I have no reason not to believe him. 17 receivers is way too much. They don't have 17. They don't have 17. They have 12. Yeah, Pooh Bear DePlug says, I thought Pittman said he was going to do an extended autograph session at the spring game, got canceled. Did they still do an autograph session? They did not. That's what they said, but I guess the weather was just – what's interesting, though, is the weather cleared up. Like, it did not rain, at least around my house, from 1 until maybe that evening. It's like it cleared up. but I think they would have destroyed the field because it had rained so much. And maybe they just felt like they wouldn't have great attendance for the autograph session also. So. We, the underhogs, always have been, always will, unless we get a Nick Saban type coach. I wonder what Nick Saban would have done at Arkansas. Like, I'm not saying like he wouldn't have done better than Pittman. I'm just saying like, is he going to win a national championship at Arkansas? I don't know. I don't know if he would. We'll never know. J-Rod says he bet. I mean, they announced it at 10, so there might have been some, but I mean, 10 o'clock. Just depends on what time you left. Little Rock area or whatnot. Do I think Crutchfield becomes one of the top 4 wideouts by mid-year of the season? I just don't know what to think on Crutchfield, Kevin. He never did anything that made me – well, one time there was a catch that he made that was thrown way behind him, and he made a pretty athletic, impressive catch. But I don't know. I didn't see like that urgency sense from him, you know. John Allen says, who is the guy on the team that's been here the longest? HUD was all hog, just wondering if there is anyone like him. Still feel like Cam Ball is the only one. So there's Cam Ball, who's been here the longest among all the defensive linemen. The next guy would be Quincy Rhodes, I guess, who's a true junior. Cam Ball will be a redshirt senior. Is there anybody else like that? Not at linebacker. Not in the secondary. And Marion Harris will be a redshirt junior on the offensive line. Wide receiver, tight end. Nope, that's it. That's it. I mean, if you look at this team, like there's not a lot of Arkansans also on this team. Not that Hudson Clark wasn't an Arkansan, but I mean, if you look at like the starting group, Quincy Rhodes, no linebackers. I'm just thinking of guys that are from Arkansas. There's just not a lot. Nobody in the secondary that I can think of. Definitely nobody that's starting. Offensive line and Marion Harris may start. Braylon Russell. Three Arkansans that have potential to start. Marion might not. Marion might be the starting right guard. Maybe Kobe Branham, one of those guys. So let's say three Arkansans. As far as guys that did not transfer to Arkansas, who are projected to start, Cam Ball, Quincy Rhodes, neither of the linebackers, unless they go 3-3-5, and then you got Bradley Shaw. Secondary, maybe Selman Bridges. Selman Bridges, I think, has a good chance to start. So 3 guys on defense, offense, Marion or Kobe Branham. Nobody else. Not the quarterback. None of the wide receivers. Not the tight end. Braylon Russell. 5 guys. Devin Bell was a transfer in at punter. Scott Starzik should start. He's a true freshman kicker. Ashton No at long snapper. So including special teams, 7 guys that did not transfer into Arkansas. Brady says, will those players be able to do it in the SEC pretty easily to do good at small schools? I guess you mean will the transition be easy for them? Hopefully to me, the only guys that really like you need them to be ready to make the transition is Lee and Neal, defensive end and the cornerback. As far as these late portal additions, I think the other guys, you just need them in backup roles. Matthew Hogan says, Trey, do you think our quarterback room will be overcrowded next year, especially if Taylon Green stays? I don't know that Taylon has got another year. Taylon's done. This is his last year. Quarterback is, as I said, a volatile position, so you see a lot of attrition there. I mean, count a year where you didn't see attrition, you know. So, no, I think it'll be probably a normal quarterback room next year. No one had them winning 6 last season, and people still got pissy. But just because the expectation is low doesn't mean that you don't feel like they should be a better football program. Like, you can't be like, oh, this team's probably only going to win 4 games, you know, and they end up winning 5, and you're like, well, you can't get pissy because you only had them winning 4, you know. 6 games is the number of Arkansas wins per season since they joined the SEC. It's not up to standard. I've said pretty clearly before that unless it's a transition year, it's not unreasonable for Arkansas fans to expect this program to win 8 games. I just don't see why it's unreasonable for the program in the state that everyone looks to as the number one program, the number one thing going. Why is it unreasonable to expect them to go 500 in conference play? Right? I mean, that's basically all we're talking about. So that's 500 in SEC play and either going 4-0 or 3-1 in your non-conference, or, you know, winning your bowl game if that doesn't happen. And then, you know, maybe everything doesn't go right and you go 3-1 and 4-4 and you lose your bowl game, and that's 7 wins and you have a crappy year. And maybe everything goes right and you win those, you know, those non-conference games, all of them, and you win, you know, 4, maybe you even get 5. That has happened before at Arkansas. And you make the college football playoff. Like, you can get to the college football playoff with 9 wins in the SEC. So, and you have a transition. You have to reload your roster with maybe not the ideal players, and you don't go to a bowl game maybe that year. But that, to me, is the only reason you shouldn't do that. And if we're factoring in 6 wins per season, that's also factoring in the years that Chad Morris won 2 games or that Brett Bielema won 3 games. You know, those years are also factored into that. It's not a mean, it's an average. So, yeah, you can get pissy about winning 6. But they did win 7 last year. They won the bowl game. I thought they had a team that could have won 8. Matt Kane Cooper says it's like God hates us. Tough. God can't help you in football. I agree with that. I don't think God is making any determination whether or not you should win football games. I always say this, like with kickers and stuff, it always used to bug me. There was a kicker at Arkansas a few years ago. Before he'd kick, he'd say a prayer. And that always bugged me. Not because it's just like the mentality of it. Like, to me, like, you go up there and you're going to knock this ball through the uprights. Okay. I don't think that God has any stake in whether or not he wants you to make this field goal versus somebody else that's praying on the other team that you don't make it, you know? But to me, like, pray, sure. Save your prayer for after the kick. Go up there with the mentality that you're going to knock this sucker through because you believe in yourself. And then thank God. Then say your prayer. Don't go up there praying, please let me make this. Like, what? That's not a mentality. That's not the mentality you should have in athletics, in my opinion. Save your prayer after. aside from like before the game, everybody says Lord's Prayer and all that kind of stuff. Johnny Campus says 8-4 with a LOL. Let's see. How's the RB room looking? I actually am encouraged by the running back room. I think it's better than I thought it was going to be. I thought they were going to be leaning on Braylon Russell alone. Not that that's a problem, but running backs get dinged up. You got to have more than one guy. Why does FSU have to have a good year? Because of Gus? I don't know. I feel like that's kind of sailed. I really thought once we could pay the players, we'd be getting great players and winning. All right, so great players that they could pay. Landon Jackson was a guy that was paid. Xavier Sorey, paid. Jaquinton Jackson, Andrew Armstrong, so on and so forth. Luke Haas. So, yeah, they got some good players that were paid. But Arkansas wasn't out ahead in the NIL game. I mean, that's the bottom line. Like, people blame Hunter Yurachek for a slow start in NIL, and maybe he's partially to blame for that, but he's not solely to blame. The Grove Collective was started by Ole Miss fans. It wasn't started by Ole Miss, the university. It was just absorbed. Arkansas just did not capitalize on that 9-win season with NIL. They didn't strike when the iron was hot. Ole Miss did, and they're in a better spot as far as NIL. But NIL is changing. Like when we go to revenue sharing, they're going to allocate 70. I've seen one outlet say 77% towards football. It was just talking like overall, and it was an estimated. I've heard 65 to 70% for football. 65%, I think, is $13.1 million that would be allocated towards football. And then beyond that, there is NIL opportunities. But anything from NIL side of things, if it's over $600 deal, it has to be approved through the clearinghouse and the accounting firm Deloitte. It has to be approved for them. And if it's not, then you get that money penalized against your revenue sharing allotment. So it's not like we're going to give you $1 million to come here and we're going to give you another $1 million in NIL. Like, you're going to have to account for that. It can't be come here and make a couple of tweets. You got to have fair market value on that. Starting offensive line right now, left tackle, Corey Robinson. Left guard, Fernando Carmona. Center, Caden Kittler. Right guard, I'll get to that. Right tackle, Shaq McCroy. The current right tackle is Amarian Harris, who they've also worked at right guard. Left tackle, he worked at left guard last year. I think Amarian either starts at right guard or is the guy that fills in at whatever position they need, which could possibly happen aside from center. But you've also got Keyshawn Blackstock at right guard, and you've got Kobe Branham, who has a pectoral tear, right pectoral tear. So that position is a little bit up for grabs. But right now, I think I would maybe put Marion Harris in that spot because pectorals, it takes some time to heal. It might set him back a little bit. Razorback Red, hey, Trey, be honest. Can we win with this FBS, not PS, level roster this year? Yeah, they can win 6 games. They could do more. Who knows? Who knows how it shakes out and what everybody else is dealing with. But to me, it's a question of can they outscore some people, because I think they're going to have to. Can they be better in the pass defense and comparable to what they were last year in run defense? If they can do that, then, yeah, I just think the schedule's really tough. Chrome domes. I like the chrome helmets. Earthman says Arkansas football sucks. And he says LOL. Thanks for contributing. Walk and talks have been good during spring. Appreciate you, Leslie. You know, Leslie, sometimes I don't know whether or not I should do that. Like, to me, like the walk and talk is supposed to be a reactionary thing, you know, like post game when emotions are running high and stuff. And like, I don't know, post spring walk and talk, like it's supposed to be just, it's kind of just like a reflection, you know, more than anything. I thought I was going to do one on Saturday in the rain. That was my plan. Maybe I still will. All right. We have gone an hour, 40 minutes because I've been answering so many questions, but I do appreciate everybody. This is easily the longest show I've ever done. I can feel it. But I want to thank Kevin Bohannan for hopping on and Danny West. If you haven't signed up at HawgSports, sign up for 50% off or $1 for your first month, HAWGsports.com. If you haven't followed us on our Facebook page, I think there's 106,000 people that have done so far. So they got to be doing something right. It's got to say something right. So follow us on our Facebook page if you haven't done so already. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. 23,000 followers or subscribers on YouTube. Most of the people who watch some of the stuff like Walk and Talk, for example, aren't even subscribed. So subscribe if you haven't done that. Apple Podcasts, we'd love to have a 5-star review. I say I'll read the latest review that we have. I was listening to Theo Vaughn and Lane Kiffin. That's a pretty good one. Okay, let's see what we got as our latest review. HawgSports Live, where we have 1.1 thousand reviews, ratings, and 4.9, which is the highest in Arkansas. I guess it's the highest possible unless you're 5.0. Yeah, no reviews since the last show, guys. What the hell? Take a moment and give us a review. We'd really appreciate it. If you like the show, support us. It really helps. It really helps the channel. So give us a rating and a review, whether you use Apple Podcasts or another podcast service. We'd really appreciate that. Sign up for the newsletter. What's wrong with the newsletter? Nothing. We just send you email to your email inbox. Usually we send something every morning, and we send something if it's like really big news. With all of our latest content, 75% of that we put in the email newsletter is free content also. A lot of that stuff you get out of press conferences and stuff that other media outlets write and stuff, we just kind of take a piece of that. We sprinkle in any VIP stuff that's also, labeled clearly. But our text alerts is important. Like, sign up for the text alerts. Like, if you want breaking news only delivered to your phone before your buddies, so you can chime in the group threads, hey, look at this. Sign up for the text alert. It's all on HawgSports. It's easy as entering your phone number. You can cancel anytime. Not a problem. All right, everybody. That's it. That's the show. Losing my voice. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Thanks for all your questions. It was a good show today. Got to talk about a lot of stuff, but went a little long since we didn't get to do the walk and talk. All right, everybody. This has been Trey Biddy with HawgSports.com. We'll catch you next time.